Today I'm going to cover an essay. It was written by Bob Black, originally as a speech that was given way back in 1980. Then it was revised in 1985 into an essay. It was published independently. It's nonetheless a non-copyrighted work, and as a result, if you go down to the descriptions, not only will there be a link, as usual, to my script and my references, but also a link to the essay itself, if you're interested. I originally ran into this essay doing some research for another one of my videos, and then it just sat on a hard drive for a number of months, and I never got around to reading it. When I finally did read it, I was hugely impressed by it. Truly, it's a bit of a miraculous essay. I mean, it kind of supersedes the form of a traditional serious essay. On the one hand, it's completely subversive. On the other hand, there's one after the other of really good points. It's serious in tone, but it's also really funny. It also doesn't pander to the reader in any way. Black drops reference after reference after reference in a way that, frankly, is sometimes a little bit overwhelming, but pretty much assumes that you're either extremely well informed or you're able to get informed relatively quickly. And honestly, it's to the strength, because there's a great deal of depth in the essay. Ultimately, I think what I love about this essay more than absolutely anything else is it takes aim directly at the heart of Western civilization, and what it says is, we're fucked. Not only are we just fucked, but we're also immorally and stupidly fucked. So what I'm going to do in this video, a little bit of a departure from my prior videos, is that I am going to break the essay into a number of pieces. Each one will be a video of about 20 minutes in length, just because, frankly, trying to edit that a massive multi-hour video altogether would probably overwhelm my ability to be patient. In each video, what I'll do is I'll present a chunk of the essay, which I will narrate, followed by a commentary section where I'll go over any obscure references, giving definitions where it's necessary, and I'll also, in certain parts, give my own thoughts when I think our author, Bob Black, has brought up some really interesting points. I will try to keep it brief, but I'll be honest, I love this essay, so I make no promises. I hope you come along with me, and I hope you enjoy. The beginning. Quote, "No one should ever work. Work is the source of nearly all the misery in the world. Almost any evil you'd care to name comes from working or from living in a world designed for work. In order to stop suffering, we have to stop working. That doesn't mean we have to stop doing things. It does mean creating a new way of life based on play. In other words, a ludic revolution. By play, I mean also festivity, creativity, conviviality, commensality, and maybe even art. There is more to play than child's play, as worthy as that is. I call for a collective adventure in generalized joy and freely interdependent exuberance. Play isn't passive. Doubtless, we all need a lot more time for sheer sloth and slack than we ever enjoy now, regardless of income or occupation. But once recovered from employment-induced exhaustion, nearly all of us want to act. Oblomovism and stakhanovism are two sides of the same debased coin." Close quote. So right from the start, without preamble or explanation, our author, Bob, sets out his call to revolution. An attack on everything the modern adult considers to be the values of a good, responsible citizen in our great, insert country name here, nation. More than money being the root of all evil, More than a Christian rejection of worldly pursuits, his target is yet more central and yet more controversial. Work is evil, and its opposite, creative play, is good. He also reaches back and uses a few carefully placed words to show us that this isn't some psychedelic-fueled dream, but a reminder of a few small yet deep historical cracks in the foundation of our civilization. He is attacking a monstrous perversion of humanity that seems to breed uniformly in every mass society. He isn't taking sides in modern debates, and his criticism is ahistorical. It has always been a part of the human story. It pops up in history again and again because it doesn't belong to history or to the present. It's just a part of our humanity and a part of our aspirations as a species. The phrase luddite revolution is a carefully chosen reminder of a critical moment at the start of the Industrial Revolution. Luddites, a term we use to mean people opposed to technology, is not what Bob is referring to. He is hearkening back to the original Luddite movement. Luddites were a large group of laborers in the late 18th and early 19th century. English workers who became famous for attacking and breaking machinery used in industrial factories. Their name is a fabricated one based on a fictional Ned Ludd, the first breaker of machines. As the movement developed, they claimed to be affiliated with a General Ludd who lived in Sherwood Forest, just like Robin Hood. It becomes evident immediately what the Luddites were about: stealing from the rich and all that, withdrawing from society in favor of attacking unfair repression and deprivation. The Luddites are important to mainstream history because they are considered an antecedent of modern labor organizations. But there were more than that. They were attacking a new type of social arrangement, one based on the brutal commercial logic of efficiency and cost. Luddites were attacking the machines and factories that were replacing cottage industries. Where cottage industries were small, independent, and creative endeavors, modern industry was huge, repetitive, cold, and everything antithetical to individual creativity. I wouldn't say that cottage industries were play, but they at least allowed for some type of individual expression and humanity. Modern industry, though, is precisely focused on the total suppression of human variability. It is focused on repetitive, precise copying. Minute after minute, day after day, week after week, and year after year. A factory is a machine and workers are reduced to mere cogs. An interesting side note on the historical Luddites: in 1808, the number of British troops deployed to suppress the Luddites, their fellow countrymen, exceeded the number deployed in the Iberian Peninsula to resist Napoleon's military expansion. I also want to call attention to the other historical whistles used very deliberately in this passage. The sentence Oblomovism and stakhanovism are two sides of the same debased coin. Oblomovism refers to fatalistic sloth. It is a reference to the book Oblomov, published in 1859 and written by Ivan Goncharov. The main character, named Oblomov, is a wealthy aristocrat who spends most of his time in bed. Oblomov raises sloth to an art form. Even if generous and likable, he really doesn't accomplish anything. The author is depicting an example of the superfluous man. Oblomov is a satire of the Russian intelligentsia of that time. Stakhanovism is the polar opposite of Oblomovism. The Stakhanovite movement was made up of Soviet workers who modeled themselves after Alexei Stakhanov, an individual reputed to have mined 104 tons of coal in 6 hours, 14 times his quota. The movement he inspired attempted to produce more than was required and thereby strengthen the socialist state. Bob isn't attacking capitalism, or socialism, or communism. Neither is he attacking the idle rich. He is attacking something utterly more common. He is attacking useless sloth and the squandering of our time. He is attacking work as a mindless sacrifice to ideologies, whether nationalism, socialism, or the Protestant work ethic. The essay continues, quote, "The luddite life is totally incompatible with existing reality. So much the worse for reality, the gravity hole that sucks the vitality from the little in life that still distinguishes it from mere survival." Curiously, or maybe not, all the old ideologies are conservative because they believe in work. Some of them, like Marxism and most brands of anarchism, believe in work all the more fiercely because they believe in so little else. Liberals say we should end employment discrimination. I say we should end employment. Conservatives support right-to-work laws. Following Karl Marx's wayward son-in-law, Paul Lafarge, I support the right to be lazy. Leftists favor full employment. Like the surrealist, except that I'm not kidding, I favor full unemployment. Trotskyists agitate for permanent revolution. I agitate for permanent revelry. But if all the ideologues, as they do, advocate work, and not only because they plan to make other people do theirs, they are strangely reluctant to say so. They will carry on endlessly about wages, hours, working conditions, exploitation, productivity, profitability. They'll gladly talk about anything but work itself. These experts who offer to do our thinking for us rarely share their conclusions about work for all its saliency in the lives of the rest of us. Among themselves, they quibble over the details. Unions and management agree that we ought to sell the time of our lives in exchange for survival, although they haggle over the price. Marxists think we should be bossed by bureaucrats. Libertarians think we should be bossed by businessmen. Feminists don't care which form bossing takes so long as the bosses are women. Clearly, these ideology mongers have serious differences over how to divvy up the spoils of power. Just as clearly, none of them have any objection to power as such, and all of them want us to keep working." Close quote. Somehow this passage feels like a breath of fresh air, a meadow in springtime fresh air. I've listened intently to economists, those high priests of capitalism, and I am impressed by their logic, keen observation, and their dispassionate mathematical explanations of reality. I've studied the work of the great minds of socialism, and I've fallen in love with their compassionate idealism. But on a deeply cynical level, somewhere in the middle of my gut, there's always this small voice cautioning against full conversion to their beliefs. Because in most every popular system, there is a clear mechanism of power and submission. It may be hidden power, it may be benevolent power, and it may be pleasant submission, yet each seeks the same goal: to turn the energy of human effort into a productive force, into a large machine with the sole purpose of enacting, or perhaps you could say foisting, the preferences of a small group onto all the rest of us. Of course I support the sentiments of feminists and minority rights activists. I want to see everyone have the inalienable right to participate in society. But at the end, if our current society doesn't deserve our participation, sometimes maybe better isn't good enough. The essay continues, quote, "You may be wondering if I'm joking or serious. I'm joking and serious. To be ludic is not to be ludicrous. Play doesn't have to be frivolous, although frivolity isn't triviality. Very often we ought to take frivolity seriously. I'd like life to be a game, but a game with high stakes. I want to play for keeps. The alternative to work isn't just idleness. To be ludic is not to be quaaludic. As much as I treasure the pleasure of torpor, it's never more rewarding than when it punctuates other pleasures and pastimes. Nor am I promoting the managed time, disciplined safety valve called leisure. Far from it. Leisure is non-work for the sake of work. Leisure is the time spent recovering from work and in the frenzied but hopeless attempts to forget about work. Many people return from vacation so beat that they look forward to returning to work so they can rest up. The main difference between work and leisure is that at work at least you get paid for your alienation and enervation. I am not playing definitional games with anybody. When I say I want to abolish work, I mean just what I say. But I want to say what I mean by defining my terms in non-idiosyncratic ways. My minimum definition of work is forced labor, that is, compulsory production. Both elements are essential. Work is production enforced by economic or political means, by the carrot or the stick. The carrot is just the stick by other means. But not all creation is work. Work is never done for its own sake. It's done on account of some product or output that the worker, or more often someone else, gets out of it. This is what work necessarily is. To define it is to despise it. But work is usually even more than its definition decrees. The dynamic of domination intrinsic to work tends, over time, towards elaboration. In advanced, work-riddled societies, including all industrial societies, whether capitalist or communist, work invariably acquires other attributes which accentuate its obnoxiousness. Close quote. In an aside, and assuming that my 2021 audience is unlikely to be familiar with 1970s pop culture, quaaludic is a drug reference. Quaaludes, according to drugs.com, are methaquinone, a synthetic barbiturate-like central nervous system depressant, and a popular recreation drug in the US from the 1960s until the 1980s, when its use was made illegal by the Drug Enforcement Agency. The active ingredient, methaquinone, is an anxiolytic, that is, it lowers anxiety, and a sedative hypnotic drug that leads to a state of drowsiness. I am aware of what they are because I'm old, but not so old that I've had any direct experience. That's a good thing because based on the description, it sounds like a drug I would have absolutely loved. But more important to the essay, this passage makes two critical definitions clear. Firstly, that he isn't talking about leisure as we usually talk about leisure. That whole work-life balance thing that is so popular with HR departments. In this case, a not isolated case, our friend Bob is being anti-subversive. Our use of the word leisure is already a subversion of its original meaning. We too often talk about leisure as if it were a medication to treat the spiritual and physical exhaustion experienced by workers. But that isn't what leisure was originally, and frankly, it's a pale substitute for leisure in its original Aristotelian meaning. When Aristotle talked about leisure, he was talking about a freedom from obligations, so that a man could develop himself and be a participant in social or political life. My personal experiences lead me to believe Bob is onto something really important. For a large chunk of my working life, I saw vacation and leisure as an opportunity to rest and recuperate. So I did things I thought I should. I went to resorts and sat on my skinny ass. My experience of this leisure was to find myself thoroughly bored and frustrated by the experience. Once I discovered that holidays could be something more, an adventure, an opportunity to test myself, or to fulfill spiritual obligations like time with family, suddenly found that leisure time became so much more rewarding. The second definition helps us to understand what Bob is and what Bob isn't saying. He isn't talking about work in its broadest sense. He is talking about work that we're forced to do, where the benefit of that work accrues to someone other than just ourselves. This helps tremendously in clarifying. So if you go into a job every day because you have to, and if you were to win a lottery you would probably stop, then you're working according to Bob's definition. If, on the other hand, you do something that you love, whether writing or wrestling, fishing or flying, something that you would do regardless of getting paid, then you're not working. even if you're actually getting paid. And we're at the end of part 1 of The Abolition of Work, an essay by Bob Black. Part 2 will be published shortly. My plan is to release these at a pace of about 2 per week. Obviously, if you want to be notified, a subscription would help you tremendously, and I would appreciate a thumbs up. As always, this is XCG wishing you a speedy journey to freedom.